Trevor Project is an organization dedicated to stopping suicide in the LGBTQ community through their crisis call lines, LGBTQ advocacy, research projects, and education. Recently, they released their 2023 U.S. National Survey on the Mental Health of LGBTQ Young People. The survey returns some pretty concerning results, with 41% of LGBTQ youth seriously considering suicide in the past year. That's just under half of LGBTQ youth across the nation considering ending their life for a few reasons, some of which include that fewer than 40% of LGBTQ youth live in a home that is affirming to their identity. That 56% of LGBTQ youth were unable to get the mental health care that they were seeking in the past year. With all of the anti-LGBTQ legislation arriving on the docket, the mental health of LGBTQ youth only gets worse, with nearly two-thirds of LGBTQ youth saying that hearing about this legislation worsened their mental health, and one-third of LGBTQ youth saying that this legislation affected their mental health most of the time. For example, in Texas, SB 14 seeks to ban gender-affirming care for minors. Fortunately, it is being delayed through the Texas House, and hopefully it will be struck down. In Montana, a similar bill, MTSB 99, passed through the House and was approved on April 28th of 2023. It's no wonder that LGBTQ youth have poor mental health, since at large they seem to be targets for legislative action. However, there is still hope. Thomas Kelem works here in Del Norte County to create a resource database for the LGBTQ community in Del Norte County. In the following interview, he talks about the survey and how it relates to his experience as a mental health provider. The whole Trevor Project, their national survey just came out. What are your thoughts on it?
I think it's awesome that they do this survey. I think that the mental health is such a huge, I don't really like using the word issue, but, mental health is just huge in the LGBTQ community. It's a big, important factor of what goes on, and having data about it is really important. Mm-hmm. And until they started doing this, we had very little consistent data.
Gotcha.
This is nice because they're kind of doing similar thing each year, so we can see how things change, we can see what's going on, they can get an idea of what things help, and it goes into a lot of detail. It breaks things out, not just a lot of surveys are just LGBTQ people this. Mm-hmm. Which breaks down the different kind of sexual identities and different kind of gender identities and different areas of the country. It's youth focused, but they break it into two categories of, there's 13 to 18 maybe, and then 19 to 24, something like that, something close to that. Because, particularly when we look at suicide rates, there's thinking about suicide, feeling suicidal, there's attempting, which, the numbers are less, but still very significant. And then there's wanting to find ways to address their mental health. The large number of people in the community feel anxiety and depression, which are pretty common things for people to experience, but very, very high levels and very large numbers of people experiencing that. And the availability of mental health care and providers and services is really low. Mm-hmm. So there isn't access to getting help a lot of the time, or people are more afraid of, talking about it or asking for help, or, particularly for younger youth, there's more concern about their parents needing to give permission or finding out, and that gets just gets very tricky. They had some very interesting questions. Young people who wanted mental health care but were unable to get it cited the following top 10 reasons. So 47% were afraid to talk about their mental health concerns with somebody else. So, that's huge already, just that people don't feel safe to even talk about it. 41% didn't want to have to talk to their parents or caregivers about it to get permission to get counseling. And there are laws that, at least in California, youth at the age of 12 can consent for mental health care on their own. And that's nice, but it doesn't always mean that they can get it, because most of the time they can't afford it. If there's like a really low fee clinic or free services, then it becomes much more available. But even if they have insurance, the fact that the insurance is going to get billed, their parents are going to find out. It's going to show up on the bills. It's not really as nice as just saying, oh yeah, you're 12, you can go get mental health services. There's still a lot of issues with access. I think 40% said they wouldn't be taken seriously. 36% said they couldn't afford it. 33% were afraid it wouldn't work. 27% were afraid that they would cause them to be outed, and they were not out already. 25% thought it would make them look weak. And that really speaks to just the stigma of mental health. That, even for anybody in our culture, you're perceived weak if you need help, which makes it so much harder for everybody. 23% said they did not feel they would be understood about their sexual orientation or gender identity. 21% didn't want to get mental health care virtually at home. So, that during the pandemic especially, most mental health care has been telemedicine. So it's telehealth has provided more access. Because even like youth in this area where there's almost nothing that they could access, they could reach out to some of the other agencies or clinicians in other parts of the state. Because with telehealth, you could see anybody within the state. And so that made it more accessible in one way, but obviously, there's other barriers as well. And 20% said their caregivers just wouldn't let them do it.
Yeah. So how does this relate to your experience in the field? Do you feel this is accurate to your experience?
I'm nodding, but it doesn't work on radio, does it? Yeah, I think it's very accurate. And I think it's so hard, for like adults, people who are, mostly the people providing care or creating access, forget or don't realize how difficult it is and how isolated you are just by the nature of being young. We think that people have access to the internet, so, they know everything. And, certainly youth at a younger age know a lot of different terms and ideas and concepts and different identities, and they learn about that. And there's some peer groups that they can participate in that help give them some support. But there's still just enormous isolation and they're not empowered in any way to really be able to reach out. Brain development is so different. Youth and these things is considered up to 24, 25, and that's really when the brain kind of matures into adult ways of thinking. So this whole segment of the population is struggling with things without the same capacity to work through them and find resources and have the resources to take care of themselves.
If all of this talk of lack of support and access makes you sad, you're not alone. Many people, especially those in the LGBTQ community, face this down every day. If you're looking to support LGBTQ youth in your life, they reported that the following topics would be helpful for the people in their lives to know more about. Support and acceptance, different gender identities, different sexual orientations, pronouns, creating safe spaces, and the gender binary. To find a database of resources in Del Norte County for LGBTQ spaces and services, visit dnlgbtq.org, which is run by Thomas Kelem. This is Sebastian for Redwood Voice.